of the historic pier. Tonight, I'm going to introduce you to our target towns in the Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes constituency. I'm going to be spending a lot of time here this year, a long way from the politics of Westminster, as the UK prepares for a general election. Throughout the year, we're going to be speaking to the people who live and work here, finding out what they're talking about and the issues that really matter the most to them. And we're going to be joined tonight by some of the people we'll be following all year, along with their friends and family. You can get to know more about them on our website. Scan the QR code on your screen right now. I'll be speaking to three of them in just a moment. But first, our national correspondent Tom Parminter has been spending time in neighbouring Grimsby and has our first report this evening.
There's a town on the Humber named after a Viking called Grim, once the busiest fishing port in the world, now harvesting wind out at sea. But onshore, there's a big political fight ahead for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. We'll be here throughout this election year, listening to what people think. And we start with a story on the eve of the budget about the people's finances.
Everybody's struggling.
How can we even afford to breathe anymore?
Perhaps a revolution is the only thing that's required.
The rows of old shoes in here are getting longer, each waiting to be repaired.
You get a lot of people now who are digging out old shoes, or they're buying them from charity shops, and they might be 20, 30 or 40 years old, these shoes, you know, and we're renovating them. It is a reflection. And some of the things I do to shoes, I just think they're not worth it, but they insist that I do them. But that's where we're at.
There's no price list in the cobbler's shop because the cost of everything keeps going up.
I mean, there's a divide which is as big as it's ever been. We've got a group with shed loads of money, and you've got people with nothing, you know, scraping pennies, and it's frustrating.
With their community struggling so much to budget, they do what they can to help out.
Where there's a will, there's a way, isn't there? Everyone tries their hardest. Everybody looks. That's the one thing I notice here. Everybody seems to look after each other as best they can. Like say, we get elderly customers and think, oh, just give us a couple of quid or whatever. But it's the only way you can. It's the only way people can manage.
Suzanne can repair almost anything, but has lost faith in what she sees as a broken political system.
It's like they've took the heart out, haven't they? They'll just take the heart out of the whole country and just say, no, you don't like as if we don't need it somehow.
But what of the future here? Much needed investment is promised in Grimsby. In the last specialist children's shoe shop in town, we met Willow and her mum Katie.
It almost feels like a privilege, like, you know, a new pair of shoes. It shouldn't feel like a luxury, should it?
She'd love to be back at work, but right now she can't put Willow into nursery. Despite government attempts to fix childcare, Katie still can't afford it.
I wish she could have had that opportunity, but financially I'm not in that position to pay. I can't pay nursery fees. You know, I don't have that money. It's not a choice.
Her mum Karen wants to be helping more with Willow, but she can't afford to retire or even cut back her hours. To say she's hacked off with politicians is an understatement.
In all honesty, I think people have given up listening to what they say because they say one thing and do another. They're not in the same position. They've never lived in our shoes.
What would you want to see the government doing for you and for this town?
To have more spare money, especially tax out of my wages and things, to have more spare money. Not to go out, but to be able to live.
From people we've spoken to here, it's clear they long to get Grimsby back on its feet, to close the divide and afford to live again. Whatever politicians say, that hasn't happened yet. Tom Parminter, Sky News, Grimsby.
Well, let's bring in our panel now. Rochelle Civita, a special educational Needs Consultant and Director of the Advocacy and Representation Service Freedom Speaks, alongside Rochelle, Callum Smith, a sixth form student and first-time voter, and Patrick Salmon, who owns fish smoking business Alfred Enderby, which was founded in 1918. And my taxi driver reliably informed me today is very famous in these here parts. Patrick, save your blushes, save your blushes. And well, welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us here at the end of Cleethorpes Pier, all born and bred in this area. So you're the first people I'm speaking to from the group that we're going to be following throughout this election year. So, Rochelle, I'm going to start with you.
Hi.
It's good to see you. What are the main issues for you at the moment, personally? We'll move on to sort of bigger local issues in a moment. But for you, what are the big issues that matter at this general election?
I want to see a bit more help for small businesses in this general election. Grimsby is an area where you can build a business, but we don't get very much help. It's difficult finding a base for recruitment, funding, difficulties with HMRC, for example, and I'd like to see some more help for small businesses, as well as family matters, things that are important to family and local community. I think we need to see some work on here in this area.
Yeah, you'll have one eye on the budget tomorrow then, presumably.
Absolutely.
With a bit of
I'm
help
not
for
holding out
business.
much hope for the budget tomorrow, but I'll be keeping an eye.
OK. And Callum, first-time voter.
Yeah.
No pressure. And we don't know when the general election is going to be, but it will be at some point this year. What are your thoughts going into this election year? What are the things that you're considering?
So for me, the NHS is going to be a big thing. Recently I've applied for university for paramedicine, so the NHS is something that's very, very close to my heart. So I'd like to see a bit more consideration for that, definitely in terms of funding to it, getting down those wait times, supporting a lot more of the staff with that kind of thing. And then all the issues that are affecting young people, so very much the environment's a big thing, so I want to be looking for consideration for that. And the human rights kind of movements, especially with a lot going on right now.
Yeah. And Patrick, what about yourself? Obviously, you have a well-established business in this part of the world. What are the big things that you're focusing on, business-wise and personally, for you and your family?
I think I'm with Rochelle. Small business needs a lot of help, and we do get a little bit forgotten, and it's a driving force behind any economy, really. Some of these big global shocks that come along, like Brexit, like COVID, like Ukraine, really hurt small businesses, and we struggle to sort of survive those readily. And it does feel like we're paying out in every direction, and we need a bit more fat on our backs to sustain those sort of global problems. Grimsby is a great, great place, and it's portrayed as a rather down and out kind of town, which is a nonsense. We've got a really, really thriving fish industry here, and I'm interested in fish, I'm interested in eating, I'm interested in diet, and I think the whole nation should be. And what would really, really do it for me if there was a government brave enough to drive the sort of, you know, the healthy eating, the healthy living perspective, and that would save lots of, you know, cost, particularly for the NHS. So really, really important.
Everything feeds into every area, doesn't it? It's about joined-up thinking. We hear that so much when we talk about public services, for example. One can't thrive without the other. Yeah. It's interesting you talk so much about business, Rochelle and Patrick. Do you think that is a problem that you're feeling from a national level, or do you think that it's something that in this area, the government down in Westminster, some many miles away, has forgotten about businesses in this part of the world? Are you not getting help? We talk about levelling up. What are you getting from that, Rochelle?
I don't see much levelling up for more northern towns and more northern areas. I can clearly see, if I ever go and visit central London, for example, that they're bustling and thriving. But I don't see that up here with our businesses. And to me, business isn't just the massive corporate organisations. Small businesses put a lot back into community, back into taxes. We work really hard for what we get back, and it would be nice to see more northern work, more northern businesses from a range of different sectors given more help.
Yeah. Actually, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've just renovated my 100-year-old smokehouse on the Grimsby fish docks, and I was well supported by Historic England, North East Links Council in funding, and that was imperative. I couldn't have done it without that help. So I've seen a little bit of that sort of support, and that's great. I also deliver a lot of fish into London through our wholesale sort of customers, and that's going to different restaurants. And yeah, it's been tough actually, despite the fact that London's very, very busy and it always looks like it's thriving. I think they have had a tough-ish time. But, you know, we're only interested in our patch, really. So, and Grimsby needs to thrive, and small businesses, as Rochelle says, are really, really crucial. They do, you know, buying local doesn't get any better than that.
Yes. And you talk about, you know, you've just, you know, redeveloped your place down at the docks. I was down there today with a historian, and I'll show you that report a bit later. And she was talking about the fact that you might not be able to see much going on at the docks at the moment compared to what it was, you know, a couple of decades ago, but there are things happening there. There's a regeneration. It's going to take time, though. Callum, for you, as a young person living in this area, is it somewhere that you want to stay, or do you think you have to leave to find opportunities? Because, you know, the regeneration, the redevelopment of Grimsby and the Cleethorpes area is coming, but it is going to take time.
Yeah, definitely. It's very much in one of those locations that's kind of not really surrounded by much. We've just got a lot of open space and a lot of farming fields. So I feel like with the regeneration coming in, it will take a lot of time. But, I mean, we've got university here. I mean, there is the opportunity for that. But to go further afield is definitely something that needs to happen right now to be able to go and find fish.
If I may, I'm just for the benefit of this young, bright young guy, you know, I did say, and we always talk about Grimsby once was the largest fishing port in the whole world, OK? Post-war, more trawlers here than anywhere else. And if you listen to the BBC, they will tell you that that's all gone and there's no fishing left. True, we don't land fish here anymore, but we are the largest fish processing town in the Northern Hemisphere.
I think the figure's about 70%, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're providing fish to 70% of the country, so really, really crucial. And there's lots of people involved in fishing, earning good money.
Wants to be a paramedic, though. Wants to be a paramedic, though. Doesn't want to go into fishing. There are other job opportunities here, aren't there?
We've got a great hospital. We can do that as well.
Well, let's talk about your voting intentions. It's not if, when the general election comes around this year. Rochelle, what are you thinking at the moment? Is there much to choose between the candidates and the parties, the politicians?
I think we've got a bit of a problem at the moment. Certainly locally, we have the Labour candidate, Melanie On's going to be running, I believe, for Labour, who was our previous Labour candidate that lost her seat to Leonici, and we've got a choice of the two. I'm interested to see what other parties put forward, some independent candidates. I'm struggling at the moment to decide where my vote's going to be. I'm going to be watching all the developments to see where my vote will be placed. But at the moment, I think it's very difficult. We've heard Leonici talk about the fishing industry, but I've heard her talk about it from a perspective that I'm now hearing is actually null and void and doesn't exist. So I think they need to get up with the programme and start doing a little bit more work in this area.
Callum, what about you? Your first time voting?
Yeah. Well, Melanie On, with the local candidate, I've had a lot to do with her when I was younger. My dad knows her quite personally, so obviously I've grown up knowing her. And I feel like she's a very genuine person. I don't really know much of Leonici, so I feel like for that kind of regard, my vote will go to her. But for overall, Labour right now isn't offering enough for young people. They've got the promise to scrap tuition fees, which they went back on, and a lot of that is deterring young people away from it, especially to other parties. So I feel like a lot more consideration is needed from both sides, Tories and Labour, to bring young people across to them to win our votes.
OK, and Patrick, finally?
Tricky, isn't it? Nationally...
You might have a bit of time, you might not have much time to make up your mind.
Okay,
we don't know yet.
Yeah, well, I think we'll have a bit more time than we think. And to be fair, nationally, very, very tricky. And it, you know, until we see what Labour have really got to offer, you know, we're coming out of a real difficult time. I defy any party to have made a fist of this last 5, 6, 7 years and come out of it unscathed. So we do need to see a bit more, you know, real information from Labour. And I mean, I voted Conservative for many, many years. I'm not sure they've lost their way entirely. I just think it's a very difficult job and hard to call it. I'll tell you what, if they sort out the post office, that might that might swing it for
That might
me.
give them a boost. OK, all right, Patrick, Callum, Rochelle, we'll be catching up with you throughout the year, so thank you very much for the moment. First of many conversations we'll be having. Now, as I've said, this constituency of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes is a key battleground for both Labour and the Conservatives at a general election as they try and find their own paths to power. Sky's political correspondent Gurpreet Narwan has been digging into the data, and she can tell us exactly why this is such a key seat.
Britain's electoral map could look dramatically different after voters go to the polls in the next year. This was the state of play in 2019. That's if we map the last election results onto new constituency boundaries. As you can see, there's a lot of blue. The Tories secured a majority, but current polls suggest Labour will win back control. However, there are some key constituencies in the North and the Midlands where the battle will be tense. And let's take a look at one of them, Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, which has now been combined into one new constituency. Grimsby, as you can see here, has a long Labour tradition, but it voted Conservative for the first time since the end of the Second World War in 2019. Things are a little different in Cleethorpes, though. It only became a constituency in 1997, and as you can see, the vote here has mimicked the result in Westminster. In recent years, it's gone Tory, but it was a Labour hold until 2010. So how will things shape up in this new constituency? Well, Labour would need an 11.7-point swing to win. That's going to be a challenge, but the party has achieved larger swings at recent by-elections. And let's put that in a national context. Well, these little dots, they all represent constituencies. This one here, that's Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. Labour need to turn 125 of these blue Conservative seats red. It needs a swing of 12.7 points across the country to get a majority. And if we look at the communities who live here in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, well, compared to other parts of the country, here there is a bigger proportion of white, working-class Leave voters. Among them, some traditional Labour voters. But here there's also a rural base inclined to vote Conservative. So the competition, it's going to be tough. The message of Brexit and the promises of levelling up really cut through here in recent years. Labour will have to battle hard to win over these communities.
Well, still to come here on this special programme, we'll be hearing from our political editor, Beth Rigby, with the Chancellor set to announce a giveaway for workers in tomorrow's budget. Some voters, they would prefer to see Jeremy Hunt investing in public services. I'll be speaking to people here who've seen a decline in this area and get their thoughts on the budget tomorrow. But it's not all bad. I'm going to meet the singer-songwriter who has written a love letter to his hometown, and we'll bring it to you live.
Morning, everybody. Today is all about the economy. The Chancellor could be a real game changer in the general election.
Will be the pre-election fireworks.
Big set-piece event of Budget Day, of course.
Whether it will be enough is the big question.
Some may soon be promised a little more money in their pocket as we head towards the election. But will these budget giveaways be enough to gain your vote? Full coverage on Sky News.
have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Live from Cleethorpes this evening. We're going to take a quick look now at some of the other stories making news around the UK tonight. And the Chancellor is set to announce that he's cutting national insurance by 2 percentage points in tomorrow's budget. Some Tory MPs want a cut in income tax, which, of course, would have boosted pensions. But it appears Jeremy Hunt is going to prioritise workers in tomorrow's budget. It means that when he stands up in the Commons tomorrow lunchtime, he'll be able to say he's cutting taxes by an average of £900 this year. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has this next report.
A Chancellor putting the final touches on his pre-election budget that could be his last. With so much at stake for Jeremy Hunt's party, as well as his own political prospects, a cut to national insurance coming our way. Miles behind in the polls, the Tories need a huge swing in support to get back into play. But voters in his constituency unsure if Mr Hunt can hold on.
I think he's probably better than his party. I think he's a fairly straightforward MP. He's a good constituency MP. Whether he'll be here after the election, who knows?
Certainly as a mum of three, I sort of get lost in knowing, sometimes there are promises made and sometimes it's really hard to trust knowing that those promises are going to come to fruition.
Members of Mr Hunt's local Conservative association say the Chancellor needs to balance tax cuts with spending on public services.
Yes, they would love tax cuts, but everybody realises in their heart of hearts that these have to be afforded.
But news that Mr Hunt donated more than £100,000 of his own money to his local party suggests he knows the fight he's in to remain an MP.
There are large numbers of candidates all over the country and they're showing their seriousness by putting their money in. We're going to fight a good campaign here and a strong campaign, and we think that we should prevail.
But a Liberal Democrat takeover is brewing here. Their leader, Ed Davey, on Hunt's patch.
Cheers.
And confident.
I think Jeremy Hunt is in real trouble in his seat from the Liberal Democrats. Everyone can see that the Liberal Democrats are the ones who can win here in Ashton Godalming, but also across Surrey, across the Blue Wall.
The Chancellor will say that this budget proves his economic plan is on track and he will deliver another £10 billion of tax cuts for workers to prove that point. But whether he says he's delivering for voters or not, you don't appear to be listening. There were tax cuts earlier this year and yet the polls haven't moved. Indeed, some inside Number 10 tell me quietly they don't expect this budget to be a big poll game changer. And that leaves the question, if this doesn't shift the dial, what next? Conservative MPs want the Chancellor to be bolder.
So we've had national insurance cuts already. We had one in the autumn statement. That is why I think the best way forward would be to balance that out with an income tax cut. And obviously that's a change to the thresholds. Up to 4 million more people will be dragged into paying higher rates of taxation because those thresholds haven't changed by 2029. And I think we need to do something about that.
Amid all the war in Tory factions, there is consensus something needs to change. And if this budget can't do it, many will be asking what can. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
And we will have full coverage of the budget for you tomorrow. You can see the Chancellor's statement in full and get all the details with us here on Sky News. All our political and economic editors are standing by. Coverage getting underway at 10 o'clock here on Sky News. And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can get involved with our live Q&A. I'll be hosting that from Grimsby. I'll be joined by a panel of experts answering your questions. That's live at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon, but the site is open now for you to submit your questions. Now, in the past hour, Birmingham City Council have voted to approve a wave of cuts to services, and they have agreed a 10% increase in council tax. The council declared itself effectively bankrupt last year, you may remember, and it's trying to make savings worth £300 million. Councils up and down the country really struggling to balance their books right now, and it's led to calls for the Chancellor to focus on public services in tomorrow's budget rather than on tax cuts. Sky's Becky Cotterill reports.
When Sarah escaped an abusive relationship, she fled to this women's refuge with her young child. She says this place saved her.
Making friends and discovering who I really am meant to be, I suppose. Yeah.
and if you hadn't had this as a place to come, what would it have meant for you?
I probably would be dead.
Most of the refuge's funding comes from Birmingham City Council. The charity is desperately hoping the authority won't cut them and the women they help off.
Our services are not cheap, but one day at mental health institution is costing between £1,000 and £2,000 per day. And we don't want them there. Just because they had years of rape and abuse, they deserve better.
Birmingham, Europe's largest local authority, declared effective bankruptcy last year. So have other councils, all pointing to lower grants from central government and rising inflation. But there are other factors here, including an equal pay dispute that could see the council liable for over £1 billion owed to female employees. Over the next 2 years, they're trying to save £300 million through cuts and by raising council tax by 21%. For this, residents will see more infrequent bin collections and less money for their roads.
I'm very sorry that we find ourselves in this position. I'm a Birmingham lad, born and bred. I've lived my entire life here, so this city matters profoundly to me, as do the communities that I serve as its leader. But I'm really clear as the new leader of this council that we've got to restore the council to financial stability, and we need to take some tough choices in order to do that.
But paying more for less, unsurprisingly, isn't popular.
If you're a working man, it's payouts, payout, payouts.
It's going to put a lot of pressure, and if wages don't go up the same amount or more, people are going to struggle.
And as people here face a bigger bill for slashed services, it's the most vulnerable who stand to be hit the hardest. Becky Cotterill, Sky News, Birmingham.
Still to come on the UK tonight, we will be talking about public services in this area, how they've declined, and we'll be talking about the organisations that have stepped up to fill the gap. And a proud heritage, I'll be speaking to a local historian about what the future has in store for a very historic area. Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight live from Papa's Fish and Chip restaurant here at the end of the pier in Cleethorpes. That's just a little something that the crew didn't eat before we came on air. Now, when you think of this area, Grimsby in particular, you probably think of one thing, and that is fish and chips. And with good reason. It was one of the world's leading fishing ports until the boats began to disappear back in the 1970s, fishermen blaming cod wars with Iceland. Well, despite that decline, the town is still the seafood processing capital of England. A third of all seafood consumed here in the UK originates in this area, originates in Grimsby. Now, a little earlier, I met the author and historian Emma Lingard, who took me for a walk around the historic Grimsby docks to talk about the area's proud heritage and what the future may hold. So, Emma, if you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks, right?
Yes.
It is the beating heart of the town. Tell me how it all began.
So it began when the railway arrived in Grimsby in 1848, and that was thanks to the directors of the Manchester, Sheffield, Lincolnshire Railway Company and landowners at the time, that they saw that bringing the railway to a port would open up a lot of opportunity, expansion for trade, building up the local economy. So when the railway came, it came all the way to the end, and they saw here an expanse of mud and marshland and spent time reclaiming that to build the port that we know today.
And boy, was there opportunity, because it's so quiet now, but to our left we've got the ice factory, to our right we have the docks where the boats would come in with the big fish hauls. And this was a town within a town. This was noisy, this was bustling. It really was the beating heart of Grimsby. So, Emma, we're approaching Grimsby's most iconic building, the Dock Tower. This is something that, if you're from Grimsby, you really do associate with home, right?
Yes, yeah. Whether you're on the land or at sea, that tower guides you home. So for Grimbarians, that is just their landmark. It symbolises Grimsby. And it's a wonderful building. It was opened in 1852. But in 1854, when Queen Victoria and Prince Albert came to the port to open the commercial dock here, they were asked to open the dock tower, so they bedecked it with pink and white bunting. Queen Victoria stayed on the ground floor, but Prince Albert and two of his daughters went all the way to the top.
How many steps?
I don't know how many steps, but it's a spiral staircase. But there was a lift in there up until I think about the 1930s. You could go up in the lift. But the views from up there are just amazing.
Yeah.
When you're looking out over the Wolds and the sea and the Humber estuary. So, yeah, it's an important symbol for Grimsby.
Grimbarians. I didn't know that if you were from Grimsby, that's what you were called. It sounds like grin and bear it.
I think many of the residents probably do grin and bear it, but yeah, a Grimbarian is the name for anybody that was born in Grimsby, had to have been born in at the time, for my generation, it was the Nunsthorpe maternity home. But yeah, you're a Grimbarian, you're a Meggie if you were born in Cleethorpes.
So this really is the best view, Emma. What does the future look like for Grimsby?
Well, this is the future, what we can see here with the renewable sector. When they arrived in Grimsby, it did change its fortunes. Though I think there were some people out there that probably still don't believe that it's, you know, the way forward. But Grimsby today is the world's largest operations and maintenance hub for offshore wind. It started with what was Dong Energy, that's now Ørsted, and it's growing. You know, more and more companies are coming in that are supporting the big wind farms that are being built there off the coastline.
There is a lot going on here that is a new focus for Grimsby.
Yeah, the new focus for Grimsby, apart from the offshore wind and the automotive sector, we've got a very thriving seafood processing industry. 70% of the UK's seafood is still processed here in Grimsby. But also the historic quarter of the port we call the Casbah has recently had money from Historic England and North East Lincolnshire Council to develop some of the buildings. So we've got cafes springing up there, we've got new tenants who are not maritime related in any way, so we've got artists and photographers, and we're also seeing a lot of interest from the film and television industry in coming here to use the backdrop for the next big movie.
So what does Grimsby look like in the next decade? Because you are getting investment here for things like the high street. There is a focus on Grimsby from local authorities and the government. So what will the new look Grimsby be like for future generations?
I think the new look Grimsby will be an exciting, vibrant place. I think people have to remember that throughout time Grimsby has been like the phoenix rising from the flames, because it's just come out in a different, you know, shade, and it's changed the way that it looks, but that's part of progress. And I think for most people in the town, it's making sure that places like the ports are kept going with trade, because everything that we see around us today is a job for somebody as well, and that's critical that we keep that going.
Oh, well, Emma, it's been interesting and fascinating and fun in equal measure. Thank you so much for showing us around Grimsby. I'm going to be spending a lot more time here over the course of the year, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. What a great advert for Grimsby Emma is. Well, throughout the course of this election year, we're going to be hearing from people here in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes about what matters most to them and what they really think of our politicians. Our next guests here at the end of the pier are all people who work or volunteer in the community, and they have felt the impact of the squeeze on public services. Let me introduce you to them. First of all, we have Stephen Ryder, who is the Managing Director of Creating Positive Opportunity, a community education initiative. He is on our far right. Kevin Buckley, closest to me, is a food bank volunteer, having previously used the food bank himself. And in the middle, Katie Oldfield, Chairperson of Cleethorpes Town Ladies Football Club. Welcome to you all. Stephen, I'll start with you, if I may. We talk about public services being squeezed and how that is going to be something people really consider when they make that choice in the general election as to who they're going to vote for. How has it impacted your organisation? How have you felt you've been dealt with over recent years?
I think there's two sides to that. Firstly, we've never been needed more, and it's never been more difficult to get long-term funding to run initiatives in the community. So I think when the public sector's squeezed, everybody feels that. We've been through austerity, we've been through COVID, cost of living crisis. I would say our demand for services are greater now than they've been probably at any time. Certain initiatives are coming to an end, but we're seeing more and more demand for the people that we serve, people who don't naturally exist in what I would consider mainstream lives. They haven't had education, success at school, they found college difficult, they're in possibly low-paid jobs where they want to improve their situation by gaining qualifications, and they're coming to us. But I think the biggest difference in recent times is people who are in work who are finding it difficult, and, you know, perhaps not even on minimum pay, slightly above that, but finding that the cost of living crisis has meant that they've reached out to community organisations where they would never have considered doing that before. So, you know, when there's a squeeze on public sector funding, it impacts everybody. We're finding it more difficult to maintain long-term projects, but there's more and more demand.
Kevin, and you're seeing the real harsh impacts of that at the food bank where you work. What are people telling you there? Because it's the budget tomorrow, and, you know, it's being pitted as, you know, there'll be tax cuts, but actually what people really want is not tax cuts. They want investment in public services.
Yeah, they do. I think, excuse me, nervous.
No, don't be nervous. You're amongst friends here.
I think what our clients want is that they want more guarantee of service of supplies, and they've got less and less over the last year, mainly because of the cost of living crisis. It's really screwed people up in the sense that they can't put anything into our donation. So I'd like people, if they could, watching us on here, if they could give a little bit more, and I realise how hard that is. So.
Yeah, so you're seeing that as a direct impact. People who want to help are so squeezed themselves at home. And we hear this so often on Sky News. People who donated to food banks are a couple of months away from actually having to use them themselves. Is that the sort of knife edge that people are living on in this area?
Some weeks they have to come to us, and that's the good thing that you see, actually. Even with our no fixed abode people, meaning they're sleeping rough. A few weeks ago they had some money given to them by the government, and they didn't come to us. So they only use us when they need us really desperately. That they're not abusing the service, if you know what I mean. They're using it carefully. And plus we get mums with 3 children, sort of thing, and they can't afford to feed their kids, so they have to come to us. Even people who are working, as has been said, it's very difficult for them to afford on certain times.
Public services are so vital for those in society who are vulnerable, whether it be for young people and their educational or special needs, whether it be for people trying to feed their family, whether it be for people who want to socialise, want to play sport, because we're talking about councils up and down the land not having any money, going bankrupt, and the first things to be cut are things like libraries, sports provisions, leisure centres. Katie, I'd be really interested to hear from you about just how vital your club and your team is for the local community.
Yeah, I think at Cleeth Town we offer football for ladies and girls all from the age of 5 all the way up to, we've got ladies in the 60s that play walking football. And I think it's important to realise that it's not just about exercise, it's about mental well-being and things like that. So it really is important for us to get out there and offer more services. And actually, I would rather see a girl, some young girls come down and play football. And it is, money is squeezing, so we sometimes have to go out and get maybe some help from funding to offer free sessions for girls. And
is that there? Where do you get that from? Are you getting it from government, local government?
It's mainly local. So Asda, they've been supportive.
So local businesses are stepping in.
But even bigger businesses like Persimmon Homes, Barclaycard, they do a nice fund that you can apply for. And every time we've got this funding, we've put on free sessions for local people, just to try and get more people involved and then see if they like it. It just gives people opportunities as well.
When we look at this general election year and the choices that people will be making when they go to the ballot box, the sense that you get from the people that you serve, the communities that you're in amongst, is it that they will be voting on local issues, things like public services? Or is it national? Is it international? What's going on in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes? So I'll start with you, Stephen.
I think probably the last general election, national politics came into play. I think things were slightly easier with pre-COVID, post-austerity. I think there was a draw here to, Boris Johnson politics. It was an incredible swing, really. I think as things have become more difficult and there's this disillusionment about what's happened over the last 4 years, I think that the choices will be local. I think they'll be
voting on more personal issues.
and voting from within households, how difficult they've found it. I think we've all said that, it's very, very difficult to find money to do anything at the moment. So I think people may vote for a change. We'll see what that change brings when it comes, but I think it will be very much more local than it has been previously.
Kevin and Katie, is that the sense that you get?
I think food bank clients would probably like to have none of the above on the piece of paper because they won't see anything change, and I don't think they will see anything change. And that's sad for them because that means they're going to carry on exactly the way they are now.
I think that is what people believe.
Yeah. Katie, can you offer some hope?
Not really. I kind of agree, what's been said, and, I think it would come down to people's personal preference in the end.
Is there a sense of apathy, then? Do I get that sense, in a way, from the people that you talk to? How do you feel yourselves, personally?
I think it's almost too big. The problems are so personal it's the here and now. It's what are we doing next? How do we afford that? So I think this idea of a general election, by definition, where we're going to be voting on international policy and things like that, I just don't think is where the reach is going to be. I'm a little bit like my friend on the end here, is that, you know, I'm not convinced that we're going to be in for a good time for some time to come.
OK, well, listen, you're doing great work in your local communities.
Mention a few names.
Oh, he's got a list out. I love a list, Kevin. Go on.
First of all, John, who picks me up every morning 3 days a week to take me to the volunteer, and Jenny at Tesco's, Kay at Asda's, Teresa at Morrison's, Sarah at his, Natalie at his, and Carl at Farm Foods.
Do you know what you're doing there, Kevin? You're guaranteeing your supply chain for a bit longer, aren't you? I like that. I like that.
Can we have a little bit more, please?
I love that. Kevin, Stephen, Katie, thank you so much for coming to speak to us. We will speak again.
Right.
You've got everything right. Thank you. Right, coming up on the UK tonight. I'm going to be speaking to a young singer-songwriter from Grimsby, hoping to tackle the bad rap that he thinks his hometown gets.
I think that when we're looking across history, that empires are a fundamental part of our history. They were the fundamental part of world order. And if we're thinking about this within the wider context, you know, King George III himself in the 1750s argued for the abolition of slavery. He argued that it was immoral. We know that Queen Victoria, for example, was incredibly kind to the Muslim community in the United Kingdom. And so ultimately, when we're looking through our history, it's very difficult to actually make these specific arguments for who should be paying reparations. I'm half Moroccan. Should the Moroccan kingdom be paying reparations to Cornish people for the Barbary slave trade? It's very difficult to actually pin down where these arguments should be lying and actually where these reparations or these apologies should be kept.
King Charles, this is the man who is obviously head of state, head of the Church of England, and ultimately decided to commission the first monarch to commission a report into the royal family's links into the slave trade. So this is a man who was very much centred around equality, right? So this is a good thing. In terms of who should pay it, that's ultimately your point. Well, it starts with King Charles, let's just be clear. The monarchy advocated and benefited from the slave trade. We're talking 3.4 million people that were transported from the African continent into the Americas and the Caribbean, 450,000 of which died during the process. Monarchy advocated and benefited from that. We also have the fact that the slave owners were compensated, so people like you, people like me, paid as taxpayers for the slave owners' declaration or agreement that was sorted out 400 years ago. In the past.
King Charles is not personally responsible. Nobody today is personally responsible for the slave trade. And I hear your point, and I hear the fact that, you know, racism still exists today, and many of the institutional difficulties that we see today stem from these historical grievances.
Yes, thank you.
However, nobody today caused the slave trade.
Yeah.
Nobody alive today financially benefits from the slave trade today. And so I think it's incredibly, I think, disingenuous to actually look at these arguments and actually say that we can trace back exactly who benefited, where benefited.
But we can.
No, we cannot.
Hello, welcome back. You are watching the UK Tonight, a special programme from the Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes constituency. We're going to be spending a lot of time here over the course of this year, in the weeks and months that lie ahead as we await a date for the general election. The new constituency of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes will be a key battleground. It's just the kind of seat that Labour needs to win if it wants to take a majority, and it's the kind of seat that the government really want to win if they want to stay in power. Let's speak to our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter. I don't know what's going on, Tom. You brought the chaos. They've probably just started up the deep fat fryer here at Papa's Fish and Chip restaurant here at the end of Cleethorpes Pier. And if you're just joining us, Tom, it's probably worth reminding people why we're here and why we're going to be here for the rest of the year.
Well, these are two separate places, Grimsby and Cleethorpes, that sit next to each other on the Lincolnshire coast, and they're merging into one constituency at the next general election, whenever that will be, probably some point this year. And it will be a really interesting fight because Grimsby is traditionally Labour, but went Conservative with Boris Johnson in 2019. Cleethorpes is more traditionally a Conservative voting area. And so you're putting these two places together into one constituency. It will be a big fight between the two main parties here. And we've already heard tonight how disillusioned so many voters are here and in, of course, many other places of the country, just fed up with politicians and politics. Well, so often the story of a general election is about what the politicians want to tell. We want to make sure that's very different this year by spending a lot of time talking to all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life in both Grimsby and Cleethorpes to hear what they want to ask of the people who want to form the next government. What are their priorities? What's going right and wrong in their lives at the moment? There's a lot going wrong for people. And where is the hope? Where is the optimism for their futures here? Or do those futures lie elsewhere? Loads of questions to try and get into through the course of the year here. And here we are on the eve of the budget. A lot of thought as to how that affects families' budgets. Be discussing a lot of that tomorrow. But people here have told us today, as we showed you at the top of the show, the divide between the haves and the have-nots here, as in many places in the UK, feels as big as it's ever been.
OK, Tom, we'll be back tomorrow. We're in Grimsby and Cleethorpes all day tomorrow for the budget, as you mentioned, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter there. Now, we do like to leave you with something a little bit different on the UK tonight. So how about this? A local singer-songwriter who's trying to challenge the bad rap that he thinks his hometown of Grimsby gets, and he's doing it through song. He is Brad Arliss, and he joins me now. Hello, Brad. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How about you?
Yeah, really good. So here we go. It's the end of the Peer Show for us tonight. You're going to play us out. But why did you want to put your thoughts about your hometown into song?
Well, I felt like the town got a really, really bad rap. Whenever I talk to anybody who's not from Grimsby about the town, all they can sort of tell me about is either the Skint documentary or the film by...
Sacha Baron Cohen.
That's the one, yes.
Talking about that with the taxi driver on the way from the train station.
Yeah.
He said it wasn't the best representation of your town.
That's what I think as well. I don't think it's the greatest representation, especially not the Skint. And there's a lot of creativity in this town. There's a lot of very, very interesting history that is not talked about enough, not just with the fishing, long tradition of like great painters and things like that. And I think I just wanted to like challenge that by talking about the bad rap that we get in the song. Yeah. And the song is just sort of saying, like, we need to, like, embrace our roots. Like, we need to love the town, both for its good parts and, you know, warts and all, if that makes sense.
Brad, how do you feel as a young person living in this area? Are you hopeful for the future? Because I was talking to a historian who was walking me around the docks and showing the plans for the future there. It would take a while to come, but there's a film industry there, automotive, renewables. The future is bright down on the docks by the looks of it.
I think so, yeah. I do think there's a lot of hope to be had with the rejuvenation of like the Casbah area, and I do think it's great that there's a lot of like green energy kind of being invested in down there. And I'm really happy to see the sort of rising arts scene around here.
And down at the docks, they're going to have a little area for that as well. Lots of cafes and artist studios and things like that, which is really lovely. Well, Brad, enough talking. Let's have some singing. And this is your song about your hometown. A little bit of a love letter. We'll let you take it away. I'll just say goodbye to everybody watching. We will see you tomorrow. I will be back on Sky News from 10 o'clock tomorrow morning as we build up to the budget in the afternoon. And the UK Tonight will be live from Cleethorpes tomorrow as well. So we're back in Grimsby and Cleethorpes tomorrow. QR code has got lots of details about that for you. But right now, it's over to Brad. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I'm Brad Arliss. The song's called Streets of Grimsby. Come from a land of industry where we once sailed off out to sea and celebrated history with the boom of the fishing industry. But as much as we tried to maintain our station, we somehow lost our reputation and swapped our dreams of history for squalor and austerity. The streets of Grimsby, now they're the place to be. The streets of Grimsby, then a place for you and for me. home to 90,000 indigents, yet famous for a dearth of intelligence. The only place that you will ever see, you better learn to love this town, Grimsby, the streets of...
Tonight, the biggest day yet in the US election calendar. People in 15 states are voting from the east to the west coast. Migration, old age, wars. What will be the key deciding factors in this election?